Thank you all for joining. My name is Samihah, and I'm a product designer. So before we get started, I'm going to set the agenda. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am, then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this talk, which is about design challenges when scaling a product that requires humans to interact with other humans or is in a multi-sided marketplace. And then I'd love to hear from all of you in 280 characters or less, or outside during the breaks. So when I was in high school, I used to make websites, but I didn't know that this was something that you could get paid to do, or you could get paid to do something that you enjoy. So I went to Berkeley for undergrad, but my first job out of undergrad was actually in finance during the global financial crisis. When's the best time to work in finance? When the whole world hates your industry. And so I found my way back to design, and more recently, I was at One Medical, and then Postmates, and now I'm at Lyft. And this is my favorite job. We are hiring, by the way. Thought I'd put that out there. Before we delve into solving challenges that scale human experiences for products and services that require a set of users to interact with another set of users, I'm going to go over some of the challenges that designers often experience when solving problems related to growing and scaling a product. When we're first starting out as designers, we're being introduced to data. So if you went to traditional school, you may have needed to take math classes. But when I first started out as a designer, I was completely unprepared for this numbers component to it, because no one told me that was part of design. Excuse me. And so while we may not be used to playing in data, and it's not necessary for us to be an expert, it is important for us to be able to digest what's quantitatively happening in our products. And some of the ways that we can achieve this is by asking for access to the metrics dashboard, asking questions about product decisions, being at meetings where goals and product performance are reviewed, booking time on our product manager or data scientist's calendar to explain the funnels or to do a breakdown of what the metrics are that are important to us. And so what does it mean to be data proficient? Well, it means asking the right critical questions so that we are able to form a much more holistic story where we're able to use qualitative data and quantitative data. So we should be as excited about quantitative data as we are about qualitative data and user research. One of the challenges that I've experienced in the past, as well as have seen other designers struggle with, is that when it comes to hyper growth and scaling of a company and design, there can often be friction between teams, whether it's in the team where you have product managers on one side and designers and engineers on the other. Also, you may have friction between growth teams on one side and core product teams on the other, where core product teams will often work on these very strategic projects where the experience is very pristine, and then growth teams go in and experiment on everything. There may also be a misunderstanding of design's role in a company that's going through growth pains. Luckily, I haven't experienced any of this at Lyft, which does have a very design-centric culture. But oftentimes at other organizations, there may be a perception that design is really just there to push pixels, or that the right type of designer is one who's only cranking out visual design. Now, visual design is really important, but it's one component of design. On the flip side, we may end up spending, as designers, too much time trying to create that perfect MVP. So when a company is scaling, there's often this need for a team focused on growing, often called the growth team. It's really creative naming. And this is a team that many designers can run away from, sort of like the people in that image. But this is also the team that investors care a lot about the results of, and there's a direct impact that you can measure on the value of the business. The perception is that growing a product is highly tactical in design, but in fact, it can be incredibly strategic. So the growth team can often be, if you reframe that, the growth team can often be seen as the center of innovation for a company because you're constantly experimenting and iterating on different initiatives and to be able to reach different goals. So whether you're designing on a team dedicated specifically to growth, or you're designing on a core product team, when we're infusing our decisions using data, people start listening and caring more about design. So until designers start caring about business goals and team metrics, we will never have a seat at the proverbial table. So how does design add value when a product is scaling? Well, most products have this longer-term North Star vision, and if not the product, definitely the company. Nearly every organization has a long-term North Star that they want to achieve. And this long-term North Star is what they imagine the future to look like. But it's near impossible to get to that future today. You can't go from 0 to 100 unless you're Drake and you're on that catch-up. But what designers are really good at is creating artifacts of what we imagine the future to look like. We're really good at saying, okay, this is our world today, that's where we want to go, this is what our users need to come along on that journey with us. We're able to bridge the gap between today's world and our ideal world tomorrow. Delayed. So what is design thinking? Essentially distilling a problem to understand how to solve it. Data tells us what's happening, but it does not tell us why it's happening. And as designers, we can add value by asking questions, by helping guide what we should test. If something is not going to be in the product ever, then why test it? If what we're testing is the right thing to test, and then asking what's next after a test. You can add value by being okay with imperfect MVPs. So an imperfect MVP is a minimal version of the ideal V1. Pixel perfection is absolutely possible. And with good visual design, it's absolutely possible while moving fast. So when I was at One Medical, I was on the consumer-facing team. So in One Medical, you have patients on one side, and you have the virtual medical team on another side, and you have in-office providers on yet another side, and then there are also admins. So I was on the consumer or patient-facing team, and the long-term goal for One Medical is to be able to provide high-quality, affordable healthcare that's accessible to more people. So essentially scaling the business in a way where more people can access high-quality healthcare. And in healthcare, that human-to-human component is still incredibly important. Technology augments the experience. It doesn't replace it, at least not yet. One Medical is a business where the brick and mortar is still very much core to the business. There are experiences that are happening outside of the software, but would be associated with the product experience. And this is true for any type of business or service where you have humans that interact with other humans, and it's outside the confines of your product. This is true for One Medical, it was true for Postmates, and it's certainly true for Lyft. And so this is where looking at things on a systems level, understanding the business model, understanding the other factors that are at play for the many users' environments is really important. So in healthcare, the way that the business model works is that there are billing codes. Billing codes are how medical practices and insurance companies communicate with each other. So for something acute, like a flu or nausea or a cough or cold or ordering an STD panel, these things they can often be done virtually, but there's a perception that patients need to come into the office to get these treated. And so the insurance payout for that could be smaller than something much more serious, like, say, pneumonia. And so when we were thinking about how do we scale the business, we were thinking about, well, brick and mortar is core to the business, and appointments are seen as inventory, but inventory is limited. So how do we scale something that's so limited and operational heavy? And so that's where virtual care comes in. Now, at One Medical, we knew that we wanted more patients to get the help that they needed by using the virtual care products that we built. And so what I did was I organized and facilitated a design sprint so that we could understand why more people were not using these care channels outside of the office visit. What we found is that people's mental models is that virtual care is something that they should only use when they're traveling or when they have a medical emergency at 2 a.m. Now, if you have a medical emergency at 2 a.m., you should probably call 911. But out of this design sprint, we had 3 projects that came out, and one of them was integrated booking flow. So integrated booking flow is essentially a test. It was an experiment to see if educating users on virtual care and giving them what they need today would get healthier patients to use virtual care so that that frees up the inventory or appointment slots for patients that were actually sick and needed those appointments and needed to be seen by doctors. So the hypothesis was that the business could scale this way and make high-quality, affordable healthcare accessible tomorrow. The first version of what we built was an imperfect MVP, but that was okay because we learned a lot and we validated our assumptions fairly quickly. So in the process of building integrated booking flow, the product manager and I had very tight feedback loops where we would meet regularly multiple times a day, multiple times a week, and next to the headquarters, there was one medical clinic. So what we did is, you'll see the spreadsheet on your right. That is all the feedback that we got from stakeholders that were internal within the company. So we gathered all of that. Then we would go on these fast feedback loops where we would have multiple variants of the interfaces, and we would use Envision and paper prototyping to just hop next door, quickly test assumptions that stakeholders were making, that we were making, that the team was making, come back, iterate, go back into the headquarters. We did this over a period of 2 days. And we worked really closely with the data science team and the engineering team. This helped us inform the feasibility for what we could do today versus what we wanted in our ideal future. The ideal future was that we would be able to use unstructured data, but unfortunately, the way that the system was set up and the way that the backend was set up is that all of our data was unstructured, but there was no way to ingest it in a way that was that could output it in our ideal solution. So what this test or what this project was essentially this test to see if integrating traditional appointment booking with video visits was worth further investing in. The result, and I love saying this because the result was that it ended up being too successful. And I feel like I can never say that again, but we ended up having to turn off the test because the service level agreement that we were communicating to users ended up becoming wrong. We were saying, you'll get your call answered within 5 minutes, and that started to increase, which is a good problem to have, but this is where scaling, where we could really think about scaling the product and what does the operational side look like. But what we were able to do, which is really important, is that we were able to validate that when you change mental models, that when you gently guide users towards a new shift in thinking, they adopted virtual care for minor issues, which is exactly what we wanted and what we wanted to test. So we didn't spend weeks perfecting the most perfect V1. We tested something and shipped something that was good enough to learn to a percentage of users and validated those assumptions so that we could then spend an even longer time perfecting that MVP. All of this took around 3 weeks to build. So that's the general flow up here. And the middle screen is the screen where we're able to capture the appointment reason, and this is where we worked closely with the data team to understand what the top 7 reasons someone was coming into the office were for, where they could actually get that treated virtually. And it wasn't necessary for them to come into the office. But we still wanted users to be able to go and book an appointment if that's what they needed. If they are a patient that's more relationship-based with their medical provider, we wanted them to be able to book an in-person appointment. We shipped quality work, had fast testing loops that helped us achieve shipping an interface that made sense to users without slowing us down. So if there's one takeaway from this learning, it's that it's okay to move fast and ship an imperfect MVP in order to test and learn so that you can iterate and ship that perfect next version. I do want to add the caveat, though, once you get that imperfect MVP validated, that you then want to go back and push on your cross-functional colleagues to ship a more perfect V1. In a lot of organizations, moving fast and growing and scaling has this perception of being incompatible with staying true to your values. But you can absolutely still have a positive impact on the world. As designers, we want to feel like the work that we're doing has an impact on the world, and that it has a positive impact on the world. Sometimes when we're so close to the data, it's hard to have the perspective that work that grows an organization that aims to do good with good intentions is having an impact on the world. So two of my favorite Lyft core values, there are 3 of them, but my 2 favorite are uplift others and make it happen. And this ties back into the work that we do. So when we're talking about uplifting others, what does that mean? Well, at the core of Lyft is tipping, and it's been at the core since its inception. So part of growing the business means initiatives that uplift our drivers. We reached more than $500 million in tips for Lyft drivers this year. That's huge. Drivers are an incredibly important part of Lyft, and when we're designing experiences that make a Lyft's driver's life easier, it helps them to earn more. That's a design challenge where we're doing good by one set of users. And by doing good, we can further scale, which helps us do more good. And so when we're thinking about how do we help drivers, it's not just focused on drivers, but it's also focused on our passengers and seeing how we can enable our passengers to help our drivers as well. And when we talk about uplifting, we also think about giving back to the community. Last year, we introduced a feature called Roundup and Donate. And in order to uplift important causes and to further scale that, to further scale donating and giving back more to the community, we need to think about scaling the business. And without scaling, it's hard to grow social giving. So $5 million were donated to numerous causes. So among these are standing up for civil liberties, supporting service members, investing in teaching underprivileged communities to code. And my favorite initiative that we've done is the Ramadan Iftar initiative. This started off as a casual conversation in Facebook Workplace. So show of hands, how many of you use Facebook Workplace? Okay, some of you. It is kind of dark, so I can't see all the way. Everyone else is correct. So started off as a casual conversation on Facebook Workplace, where we started talking about the driver community. And I casually mentioned, oh yeah, so Ramadan's coming up, and this was about 6 weeks ago. Ramadan is coming up, and a significant portion of our drivers observe Ramadan, which is where people observing Ramadan will fast from sun up to sunset. And they'll fast and abstain from water and food and anything to drink. And a team member from the local marketing team reached out and was like, I'm so excited about this because I think we should do something for the subset of users or the subset of drivers in the driver community. And I was like, yes, let's do it. How do we get this going? And so tying back to the value of making it happen, we decided to get a group together, driven by the local marketing team. And we were brainstorming what can we do to give back to this subset of our driver community. And we ended up funding iftars. Iftars it's the meal at sunset to break fast for people that are observing Ramadan. And we decided to do this all across various markets. And at certain driver hubs, they also stocked the driver hubs with dates, bottles of water, nuts, and snacks so that drivers who choose to drive during sunset have something that they can break their fast with. The New York City hub also set up a prayer room for the month so that drivers who are observing can go and pray. And these initiatives, increasing driver tips, raising money for causes, supporting a subset of our driver community, are things that I want to see more of. And when we think about growing and scaling the business, we do so with the intention that we can also scale and grow these kinds of initiatives. And so I want to end on these 3 points. Actually, no, never mind. I'm not going to end on these points because they're written right here, and I'm going to assume everyone's probably reading it. Instead, I'm going to end on this. When shipping an MVP, it's okay if it's not your ideal future version, but if the experiments are successful, push on your cross-functional colleagues to build that perfect next version. So I'd love to continue the conversation and hear from you what design challenges you've faced when scaling a product, whether it's in a multi-sided marketplace or where you have humans that are interacting with other humans, or you have humans interacting with software. I can be reached in 280 characters on Twitter, or you can come see me after. Thank you.